So any immediate questions? I will talk about the Apocrypha or whatnot, but any other questions?
With Exodus, did Moses also die in the desert?
He did actually. Moses does commit an act of great disobedience against God, and so Moses does not die in the promised land. He is allowed to see it. So he stands up on a peak and sees it, but he does not actually enter the promised land alive. So he is kind of punished as well.
What egregious act did he commit?
I'm sorry, somebody say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say I didn't know that either. What did he do?
He God told him to strike a rock, and he struck it multiple times when God said just do it once. So kind of exhibiting as if it was his own ability to do that, to act, instead of just doing it once and doing as God said. So a lack of faith, it could be said, by doing that.
Wasn't he also in the, I guess they portrayed it that way in the movies. Didn't he still get the 10 Commandments and he presented it to the people before they went on to the promised land, or before the non-believers?
Yeah, he does pass the 10 Commandments on to the people. But it is the next generation who receives it, not the generation that disobeyed, not the generation that engaged in the idol worship. So,
okay.
Any other questions? So, good stuff. Before we dive into the New Testament world, a brief sidetrack into that. Somebody brought up, talking about the books of the Maccabees. In some circles, they are called Apocrypha. In others, they may be called deuterocanonical. In the Old Testament, there are 7 books or seven books or sections of books that are heavily debated between Catholics and Protestants, Catholics and Orthodox versus Protestants, about whether they belong in the Old Testament or not. This debate stems from the time of the Reformation, from about the 16th century onwards. It does not extend into the New Testament. All mainline Christian denominations accept all the books of the New Testament, the 27 books. It is the Old Testament. Although there is evidence that many of the reformers wanted to throw out some of the New Testament works, especially the letter to James. We'll talk about as we get to that. So there is argument about their canonical status. Do they belong on the list? Catholics and Orthodox say these books do. Protestants do not. So that's where that distinction comes from. Looking at this from a Catholic perspective, we will be seeing them, although not really encountering them that much, since we're focusing on the New Testament. But that is some of the sticking points is that authority to say who says which books go in there. All right.
The Protestants say that Catholics added the books.
Yes, that's depending on which denomination. Some may phrase it that way. That they'll say these are later editions, that they're not inspired. Catholics say they are, and Catholics and Orthodox both believe that this is the same Bible that we received. That in part reflects because of the world in which the New Testament emerges. So we need to understand the environment and the peoples in which this New Testament emerges, because that's part of what is behind that issue. So for those of you sitting here in person class, you can see the map over here. I'm sure the online class, you can imagine what a map looks like. That map is more of Europe in between the world wars, but it can give a bit of a frame of reference because the world we're talking about is the world of the Mediterranean. In particular, the backwater province of the Roman Empire that is known in the Latin as Judea, which is how they translated the Hebrew name Judah. In fact, this is where we get the term for those who are descended from these people, because it became those who were Judeans, were those who were of the ethnicity of this land, because it wasn't just necessarily the territory, but the people are from Judea and are Judean. And eventually, through corruption of languages, gets to be the word Jew, as we know today. A Jew is not just one who practices the Jewish religion. They are also overwhelmingly of that ethnicity. It is an ethnicity because it is from a specific place or a specific people, we should say. While there can be converts in some strands of Judaism, more often than not, the only way is really you marry into it, male or female, usually a female more. So, this world of the New Testament has a few cultural influences in it. The first great cultural influence is of the culture that we talked about in those last books of the Bible, the Maccabees, at least in the Catholic context, who conquered, who rebelled against the people who were descended from Alexander, and that is the Greeks. Because of Alexander the Great, Greek was the most common language spoken throughout the world at the time of the New Testament. Even though the Roman Empire pretty much owns everything or occupies everything, Greek is still the language of the day. If you want to converse over business, over scholarship, if you want to travel, you must know Greek. Kind of in many ways how English is the major cultural language of our day. Even though not everyone is born in an English country, if you want to conduct business, if you want to engage in scholarship, if you want to travel, especially to the United States or to the UK, you have to know English. And in fact, especially with the widespread availability of the culture of the internet and all that, English is seeping into many languages. Many of those your age or younger use far more English than their parents used. Words like internet or the World Wide Web are spread, they're not translated. They're just taken over. Same here with Greek. So, first of all, Greek provides us the language. We talked about that at the beginning of class. The New Testament is written in Greek. And in fact, not just any form of Greek, but a form called koine, which means kind of the common. So it's not necessarily a high, elevated, or archaic form of Greek. It is the common Greek that everybody would have known, or that everyone could understand. This is true not only of the New Testament, but even in relation with the Old Testament. Because there were many Judeans, ancient Jews, who moved out of their homeland, but still gathered and worshiped the same religion that they had done when they were in Judea, to worship the one true God. Most of them did not speak Hebrew or Aramaic, though, the language of their actual people. Being among the foreigners, they spoke and read or heard Greek. So to help with that, at some point before the New Testament, the dating's not precise on when it happened, a Greek version of the Old Testament is written that comes to be called the Septuagint. It is so called because the tradition is that there were 70 scholars who worked on this translation. So the language of Judea, there is either ancient Hebrew or a more evolved form known as Aramaic. They translate the Old Testament from this Hebrew or Aramaic into Greek. And that becomes the Septuagint. If you look in scholarship, it is often labeled LXX. Why might that be?
Roman numerals for 70.
They not teach Roman numerals anymore? That's a shame. It's a real shame. Yes, in a lot of scholarship or whatnot, it's initialized to LXX, which literally means 70. It's the Roman numeral for 70. So if you see something LXX says this. That's important because it is a translation of the Old Testament. Remember, we talked about the issues of translation at the very beginning. You know, the texts that we have are translations of the Greek. So this is a translation of that Old Testament. It can at times be slightly different or have a slightly different meaning than perhaps the original Old Testament text did. But in fact, this is the text most often cited in the New Testament. There are references to the Old Testament in the New Testament. Overwhelmingly, they come from this Septuagint, this Greek translation of the Old Testament. There is also, of course, not just the Greek influence, but of course the major political power that dominates this whole region. Rome. The Romans. Poor Judeans trying to shout at the Roman overlords to go home. Romane eunt domus. And failing every time because they don't know their Latin. The Rome that occupies the Mediterranean is the beginning of the empire. The Republic has fallen. The first Roman Empire rises. In particular, the life of Jesus begins with the first Roman emperor, Augustus Caesar. The relative of Julius Caesar, the famous man of the people, murdered on the Ides of March in 44 BC, to the ire of the Republic ever since. Augustus, along with others, takes control of the Republic and establishes himself as an imperator, as the one who commands, as the one who is in charge. and eventually taking the name Augustus Caesar, beginning to rule by fiat, by force. At this point, Rome occupies basically everything around the Mediterranean and even stretching north, having territory throughout most of modern-day France, Belgium, Switzerland, stretching into the southern parts of Austria and Germany, territory over in Britannia, modern-day London, Canterbury. They have pretty much conquered the known world, the Western world of this time. The most enemies they have might be the Persians in modern-day Iran, but even they are kept in check. Augustus reigns from 27 BC until the year 14 in the Christian calendar, Anno Domini, which literally means the year of the Lord in Latin. Now, most of you probably got the whole CE thing. What does that normally stand for?
Common era.
Common era? What's common about it?
I thought it was Christ era.
No, it's called the common era, but the only thing that's common about it is that Jesus Christ is common in all of it. Now, some will do that trick that they'll say, oh, it's the Christian era. No, that's the Christian calendar. This is just being lazy and not wanting to create a new calendar. And just trying to remove the reference point, which is Jesus. The dating of the very calendar that we use is based around Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth. So Augustus reigns from 27 BC to AD 14. After him comes the reign of Tiberius, one of his generals. He reigns from 14 to 37. These two men reign over pretty much the whole world, the entire life of Jesus. Why is this important to know? Because of the environment that it establishes, not just in this period, but even in those in those following decades that lead up to the conclusion of the New Testament period. This reign of Augustus and Tiberius is a period of immense stability in this section of the world. There are relatively few wars. There are relatively few famines or severe environmental catastrophes. The whole world seems to be at peace. Hence why this period comes to be known among historians, not just Christian historians here, but any historian. It is called the Pax Romana. Which is Latin for the Roman peace. Because this peace can only happen through the actions and the governance of the empire, the Roman Empire.
What was it? Reign of peace?
Roman peace. Pax Romana, Roman peace. This has four effects. for this whole area, not just, which are immensely providential for the spread of the New Testament, for the spread of the Christian faith. First of all, is ease of travel. This is a large area, about the same size as the United States, yet existing 2,000 years ago. This is not a period where it is very easy, as it is now perhaps, to be able to send navies or militaries to any point in it. The fastest way to send a ship is by sail. Fastest way to travel on land is by horse. So in order to maintain such an expansive empire, the Romans need to make travel easy for their military. Hence why they build roads. They build some of the first and most solid roads. In fact, many of the Roman roads are still used today. Basically just paved over with asphalt. Same path, same place between cities. Now, of course, traveling by boat or by ship is probably still even faster, depending on the way the winds blow. So there is stability even there, making sure there are not as many pirates or brigands who attack ships and try to steal goods. It still happens, but not in as massive of numbers, because there is stability and security. So ease of travel is the first. That ease of travel provides the second benefit, the ease of communications. The point of those roads is not only to be able to send men, armies, or supplies, it is also to allow quick communication between the capital, which is Rome, and all the provinces. Now, certainly, each of the provinces, the particular regions, are governed by an individual governor who has been given overall authority, but at the same time, it is still a bureaucracy. They are still to file reports or to send in major concerns or major questions to Rome about how to deal with these things. In fact, one of the earliest witnesses of Christianity outside of the New Testament is an imperial letter sent to the emperor from a governor, of Pliny the Younger, who was governor of an area in modern-day Turkey. I want to say around the year, around the 80s or the 90s. 0080, not 1980. Asking about how to deal with these Christians seem to not want to offer the imperial sacrifice. Talk about that a little bit later. But they need to spread, they need to be able to communicate well. And that travel helps that communication, which is not just for the use of the government, the empire. People use it as well. People are able to use that for themselves, just like the interstate system. The interstate system was not built for economic reasons. That's a side effect. Or for us to be able to travel here and there. It was built during the Cold War for us to be able to ship goods, military goods, quickly and easily from one major place to major place. Its side effect is that its use by the populace has made it easier for us to travel between areas. Whereas it used to take something like 20, 25 minutes to get from here in Crestview Hills into Cincinnati, it takes more like 10, 15 minutes on a good day. Seems rare anymore. It's the same in the Roman Empire. That's a secondary, the needs of the government facilitate this need to make communications and travel, but it benefits the whole populace. Which leads into the third one. The ease of travel, the ease of communications, in particular, with military strength and military power, provides economic stability and prosperity. Economic stability and prosperity. So by this third point, since there are relatively few wars, few struggles, few revolutions, the world is at peace. Everyone is able to go about their business far better, far more quickly, far more efficiently. They don't have to worry about being robbed or overrun. So there is immense economic stability there, and people are able to afford things better. Goods are manufactured at a cheaper cost. They're able to be spread more. And that leads into the last effect of the Pax Romana, the last of these four effects. That ease of travel, that ease of communications that allows for that economic stability and prosperity opens the way for a spread of culture, and with that, a spread of ideas. We referenced that a little bit in talking about the Pax Romana and talk about it in modern day terms. Some people call this period, which may be at an end, but we'll see. They call this period the Pax Americana, the American peace. Because America being the dominant power, in fact, at times being the only real superpower, there's ease of travel, ease of communications, economic stability that allows for the spread of culture and ideas, especially American culture. Now, we don't necessarily think about that from ourselves, but there are numerous people who around the world whose main source of culture is basically American culture, whether received on its own or whether translated. The major ideas that are formed in this world right now, whether scientific, whether philosophical, whether somewhere in between, seem to be emerging from American universities and institutions in cooperation with others, not as if we are the only source. But this Roman peace allowed for a friendlier encounter between different groups. That instead of seeing each other as merely just grabbing for resources, they saw each other in a more friendly light. So they would be more willing to listen and to hear what others have to say. This, of course, would be most beneficial when trying to proclaim the one true God revealed through Jesus and all that Jesus did and said in his life. So this Pax Romana, this Roman peace, is the major contribution of the Roman Empire in the world of the New Testament. And what actually happens, the events that are portrayed and related in the New Testament, and what immediately happens afterwards. The first few centuries of the Christian era. But not only is there obviously the Greeks for their language, especially in translations, not only is there the Romans for their governance and stability through the Pax Romana, there is also, of course, those who are living in the immediate land where much of the New Testament happens, the land of Judea. And I am not joking when I say this is a backwater province. If you look on the map, Rome is kind of right in the middle of the Mediterranean, right in the middle of Italy, almost on the sea itself, actually somewhat inland. Judea, modern day Israel. Think of that distance. Now try to think of that distance in a land of only horses and ships. It's pretty far from civilization or culture. It's been under the control of the Romans for about 70 years or so by the time of the birth of Jesus. And yet, then, as even now, it is a hotbed of division and strife and violence. Because the Judean people, those ancient Jews, are still the same people, or the descendants of the same people that we just talked about in the Old Testament. What was the one thing God promised to Abraham? See how much you're paying attention. What did God promise to Abraham?
Promised land.
Basically, yes. This land will be yours and your descendants. And your descendants shall be as numerous as the stars, or the grains of sand. And yet they are not independent. They are subjects of a foreign power that worships a foreign idol, not the one true God. So it is a land filled with struggle. Whether to cooperate, whether to rebel, whether to get along, whether to upend everything. So even though it's far away, it's still a major focus of the Roman Empire. There are constant revolutions or uprisings that have to be suppressed. Now, the Judeans of this day are not as united as we may want to think people may be in these times. There are kind of 4 divisions among these Judeans, 4 different groups, many of whom we will encounter in the New Testament, in the Gospels even. The first, the kind of most known group within Christianity are the Pharisees. The Pharisees are a very conservative group, even further than that, a very traditional group. That are concerned with maintaining the full observance of the ancient laws, the laws of Moses. But not only that, they not only rely on that ancient text that was in their words called the Torah, the writings or the laws, but they also had their own oral traditions about what to do. If you read the Old Testament laws, the major emphasis of the majority of the laws is about maintaining religious purity, to remain pure in the eyes of God. And though the Torah, which is the Old Testament, as referenced by the Jews, even of today. Though the Torah has much within it, there are also things that emerge outside of the text itself. These oral traditions, washings of different things. This group of Pharisees, by the way, are not priests. The Jewish religion, the Judean religion of this time, has a class of priests who offer sacrifices, especially in emulation of the Passover. Every year at the Passover, they sacrifice a lamb. Multiple lambs, one lamb per family. They make other sacrifices as well, cereal offerings or burning holocausts of rams and bullocks. But they're not priests. They are pretty much non-priests, what we might call the laity. In particular, many of them are often scribes. Now remember, in this time, not everyone could read, and not everyone could write. So a scribe, in a certain sense, is one who writes, who usually can read. More often than not, especially these Judean scribes, they're copying the Torah. They have to do it by hand because there's no printing press. The only way you can pass anything on is either word of mouth or write it down, even if you copy it. And so many of these scribes comment on the Torah, on the law, because they are so exposed to it, because they always are copying it to make sure the text remains active. So they have time to read, to reflect on it, and to offer their own opinions. Hence where many of these oral traditions come from. Many of these scribes offer their own oral traditions. Now we will see these Pharisees in many ways in opposition to Jesus when we enter the Gospels. However, they have many points of agreement with what Jesus proclaims. There are the major points of division that we will see, but there are the points of agreement. For example, the idea that that the people will rise from the dead on the last day. That there are spiritual beings, both good and bad. The good known as angels, the bad known as demons. That God desires some sort of future and permanent life beyond what is offered in this world, on the other side of death. In those things they agree greatly, the Pharisees and Jesus. It is in other points that there will be major differences. Differences to the point of death, as we shall see. The next group that we encounter is called the Sadducees. Now, whereas the Pharisees are mostly the laity and more often than not, kind of the lower classes of society, the Sadducees are more aristocratic. And especially most of the priests, especially the priests of the temple, are Sadducees.
How is that spelled? S-A-D-D?
S-A-D-D-U-C-E-S.
Thank you.
I know my writing's not always the best, and that's what it is. The Sadducees are conservative in a different sense, not religiously, but politically. Being aristocrats or being the priests in charge, they have most of the power. So they are not much for rocking the boat, for upending the control of Rome in Judea. The Pharisees are very much opposed to Roman occupation. Not often to the point of inciting rebellion, but they despise these foreigners, these goyim being here, taking over their land, the land God gave to them. The Sadducees don't have the short end of the stick. They're in power. They're like, it's fine. Everything's great. It's okay. It's fine. They are a little bit, they are not necessarily so traditional as far as religion goes. They don't care about any of these oral traditions the Pharisees pass on. All they observe is whatever the Torah says. That's all you need. That's all that matters. There's nothing more than that. So, they have many doubts about some of those things the Pharisees believe, and even Jesus believes. Angels, future life, the resurrection of the dead on the last day. Such that when you die, you die. Hence, why they're sad, you see. I had to do it, sorry. Yes.
Are you suggesting the Pharisees are fair?
Well, it depends on what you see. Actually, it depends on what I see. You throw me a softball, I'm going to hit it. I'm not the best athlete, but I can hit sometimes. So the Sadducees are fine with Roman authority because they are in authority. They have no issue appealing to the Roman governor or the Roman legions if they need it. So whereas the Sadducees may not be so conservative in religion, but conservative in power, the Pharisees are more conservative in religion and maybe liberal in power. They are the most liberal. The groups known as the Zealots. A second here. The Zealots are fierce nationalists. Far beyond the hatred of Rome and Roman things that the Pharisees have. They want them out. Because what have the Romans done for them? Only given them the aqueduct and education and gymnasiums and free healthcare and things like that. But besides that, what have the Romans done for them? Nothing. They've tramped all over their precious land, and they want it back. Yes, sir?
Was that Life of Brian?
It's possible it might be. I already made one. I'm surprised you all didn't catch that one.
What was the first one?
Romanes eum domus.
That one I got.
Yeah, Romans go home.
And then he wrote up.
What is that?
That's right. It all comes back. It all comes back. The Zealots are, as their name ultimately rises to, zealous for their land. They want Judea for the Judeans. So they are concerned with expelling the Roman authority. And whoever's on their side, they're fine with them. Sadducees or Pharisees. More often than not, the Pharisees, though, lean towards them. They are the ones who organize the major rebellions against Roman occupation. And there are two of note in the period of the New Testament. The first is in the year 6 Anno Domini, AD 6, not AT, the number 8, AD 6.
You said they bring an uprise against the Romans?
An uprising against the Romans, yes, in the year 6.
Zealots?
6 AD. The year of our Lord 6, as it said in English. This one is not very successful and is suppressed rather quickly. But a larger one will result in what's called the Jewish War that happens in the year around the year 70. Starts in the late 60s, but 70 is the height of fighting. 70 is important because it is the year Jerusalem is besieged by Roman troops after these zealots have gained power and forced the Romans out. They gather legions together, march in, besiege Jerusalem, and tear it to the ground. What the site known today as the Wailing Wall or the Western Wall is pretty much all that remains of the temple in Jerusalem in the time of Jesus.
You said the second war was called the War of Jews?
Just the Jewish War.
Jewish War.
The Jewish War against Rome. It is known that's how it's known in the annals of Rome. The War of the Judeans.
I'm just trying to get a good sense of timeline. What year did Jesus die?
Jesus is said normally to die around the year 33. He's said to be born around the year 1 BC, 1 AD, something like that. The traditional date or year of his death is 33. We'll talk about that some there. There is some scholarly arguments about maybe it's earlier, maybe it's later, but in general, the Roman tradition has been 33. So this is a generation or two after the life of Jesus that this destruction of Jerusalem happens. In fact, the most famous part of this war is the last stronghold of the Zealots is in a fort called Masada, and it was up on a high mountain. The Jewish Zealots had destroyed the entrance, so the Romans built an incline, straight up to the top. You still can walk up it today, nearly 2,000 years later. By the time they got up there, and of course, at the beginning, they were pelted with things and whatnot, but that died down. By the time they built everything and they poured into this fortress city, nearly everyone was dead. Starvation, just withered away. They're pretty much all gone. So it was kind of a hollow victory for the Romans, but still a victory nevertheless. The last group to be around is one not directly referenced in the New Testament, but still existing in some sense. A group called the Essenes, Essenes, Essenes. These were some of the most religiously observant of the Judean peoples. More often than not, living a communal life separate from your average rural village or town. They would start their own little colonies or communities, intentionally living together with each other. Lots of prayer, lots of worship, reflection and study. You could almost say they're almost at times almost like an apocalyptic cult. They kind of set themselves aside. They're waiting for something to come, waiting for something to happen. What that is, they have some inkling, they have some hope, but they don't know exactly what it will be. We know much about the life of these Essenes because many of the texts and archaeology that we have found from these communities. The biggest find was in the late 40s, the early 50s, what are known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. Some of the most complete preserved texts, manuscripts of the Old Testament and other Jewish writings. Completely preserved in caves around the Dead Sea. Not just texts of the Old Testament, like I said, other religious texts or other descriptions of daily life that show them to be in somewhat monastic or somewhat even, we could say in the modern context, maybe perhaps like almost like Amish communities. Kind of withdrawn, separate, but still living a communal family life. It's argued that some of the disciples of Jesus and some of those that were influenced around him were come from this Essene community. So, but this is kind of the world of the New Testament. The wider influence of the Greeks, the massive influence of the Romans, but even that which cannot be neglected, the influence of the Judeans, the ancient Jewish people, from whom begins to emerge, comes this Jesus and his first believers. We'll begin to dive into that, to talk about that next class. Any comments or questions on any of that? What? Yes?
So you said there was that the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the 40s and 50s.
Yes.
So
1940s,
so were
1950s.
they like even on record like before that?
Somewhat, but not as well known. Like I said, they're a very withdrawn group. So, all right. Be sure to finish your reading journal for this Friday. You're going to have a second one assigned. I think the dates are wrong on there. I'm going to make it due not next Friday, but probably the Friday after that. So you'll have 2.5 weeks to work on that. A second reading journal, but that information will be on campus. So check out the readings and the assignments for next week. Be sure to do the assignment quiz, the participation assignment. If there's anything else you need, just let me know.